Hello there, people of the internet. So this rifle right here has pissed a lot of people off on this channel. I don't really understand the concept of why people get angry with it, because I mean it's a cool rifle and I like it. But this is an M16 inspired build. This one right here is, well, it's a PSA upper built off of a KP15 lower. And if you don't know what a KP15 lower is, then look up the What Would Stoner Do project, and you'll figure out very quickly what it is. It's a really, really cool concept, and I really like it, and I'm probably going to build some more off of these lowers. But anyway, whenever I break out this rifle, I get a bunch of people in the comments, and they're like, wow, that thing's really cool. I actually like it. You got some A1 and some A4 and some A2 things going on, and it looks cool. I like it. And then I got the purists that come in, they're like, what the hell is that horrible abomination? That needs to be thrown into the nearest pit and buried. And I'm like, well, if you don't like my rifle, that's fine. It's my rifle, it's not yours. I can take it out to the range and enjoy it. But like seriously, I get some people that like foam at the mouth in the comments in hatred and anger over this rifle simply because it is not an absolute, exact, precise build. Like I have some A4 and some A1 and some A2 things going on with this, and the carry handle on this is not attached directly to the receiver. I mean, it's one of those to where you can take that off and throw an optic on there if you felt like it. I'm not going to do that because obviously I want this to be an M16 inspired build. But I get people that come through and they hate this thing because it's not absolute, exact, precise to, you know, the precise specifications that the original M16s were being built on. And they're like, is that an A1? Is that an A2? Is that an A3? A4? What's going on here? What have you done? Look how they've murdered my boy. And I'm like, no, this is just a inspired build. It's not supposed to be a clone or a replica or anything like that. This is not an exact thing. Typically, whenever people talk about clones, they try to clone a rifle as close as they possibly can, right down to the markings on the rifle. And a lot of times, especially in civilian ownership, we can only do so much whenever it comes to cloning these M16 style rifles, simply because we are only allowed to have semi-automatics here in the United States, with the exception of like pre-86 and dealer samples. And if you get yourself a tax stamp and register it, and there are ways to get fully automatic firearms here in the United States, but for the most part, we can only own semi-automatics. So even if you do have absolutely everything right down to the exact specifications on your clone build, then you're still going to have people that go down in the comments and they're like, it's not truly a clone build because it's, you know, not fully automatic, it's just semi-automatic. And then you'll have people that go down and they're like, you know, wow, that thing is absolutely amazing in every single way. And I see the same people that talk about things like this. This is obviously not a clone by any means. It is, like I said, just an inspired build. But let's go ahead and talk about some other platforms here. This right here is my Star BM. This right here is not a clone, like an exact clone of a 1911, but by God, is it freaking close. Obviously, the Star BM, this is a Spanish 9mm 1911 copy. It's not an exact copy. The extractor is on the outside of the slide, and the trigger, I believe that the trigger's got some different dimensions to it to where it pivots instead of getting pulled straight back. But there's very, very minor differences with this system. However, it is obviously very closely, very clearly inspired by the 1911 system. And there are a lot of things with this Star BM that are precise and exact with the 1911 system. But if you had one of these, like, you know, completely spec'd out to exact specifications of the 1911. Let's say we had one of these in like 45 ACP even. Like we had just the absolute epitome of the 1911. But on that particular 1911, the extractor was on the outside of the slide instead of on the inside of the slide. Then instead of being a clone of a 1911, the purists out there would say that's not a clone of a 1911. The extractor is on the outside. That right there is an abomination. You need to go throw that in the same hole that you just threw your M16 into. You need to get rid of it. It needs to no longer exist. I want the exact same thing that, you know, I had 50, 60, 70 years ago whenever I served in the military. And well, there's just people out there that wholeheartedly hate how other things are just inspired and based off of the designs that they originally knew. Like, for example, like I said, this is not exactly a clone, but damn, this is one closely related inspired build. It doesn't have the grip safety on it, and there's a magazine safety built into this thing. There are some differences, but it is clear that they were going for a 1911 inspired build. Or let's go with something a little bit on the other end of the spectrum. This is a Heritage Rough Rider in 22 long rifle. Now, this right here, I would not call this a clone of anything, just because of the safeties and the mechanisms and the way it's designed and the specifications and all sorts of stuff. But you can clearly tell that this right here is inspired by the 1873 Colt Single Action Army. Obviously, it is not exactly the same as that, but this is an inspired build based off of that design. So a lot of times whenever I come out here and I talk about the 1911, I'll break out this right here and I'm like, yeah, let's talk about the 1911, and this is some general things to notice with that system. And although they are the same on this system, like if I'm talking about the hammer profile or the way that the slide interacts with the barrel or the locking system or something like that, it's the same on the Star BM as it is on the 1911. But despite the fact that they are exactly the same, even though I am, talking about how they are the same, people will still point out that this is not a 1911, so what I have to say is completely invalid. Or if I'm out here talking about the 1873 Colt Single Action Army, I don't own one because I'm poor. If I'm talking about that, I'll break out this right here to serve as a representation of the Colt Single Action Army, and then I'll get people that go through with that. They're like, that's not a Colt Single Action Army, that's a Heritage Rough Rider XYZ, and I'm like, yeah, I know, I pointed that out at the beginning of the video, but this is clearly inspired off of that design. So I could use this as a representation, and even whenever I say I'm using this as a representation, I still get the people that go in there and they're like, no, that's not that. You absolute moron. You are the worst. Like, for example, I don't own an M1A or an M14. So I actually use my M1 Garand, however it is that you want to pronounce that. I use that rifle to kind of represent the M14/M1A, depending on what it is that you want to insert there. And I had a ton of people go through, and they're like, yeah, you didn't even bring up the M1A or the M14. And I'm like, yes, I did. Yeah, I literally don't have one. I told you guys I don't have one. That's why the M1 Garand is here. But that's just a rant for another video. There's people out there who will just foam at the mouth if you don't have an exact, complete specification clone of what it is that they're looking for. And personally, well, I'm going to go ahead and extract that statement, retract that statement, and not say what I was going to say. I don't like that there's people out there who absolutely foam at the mouth over the things that you own. And these same people are the types of people who say that you should own anything and that nobody should be able to tell them what they can and cannot own or can and cannot do. And I'm like, guys, this is my rifle. This isn't yours. If you don't like it, then that's fine. You don't have to own one of these. But then there's people out there who absolutely love this thing. Myself included. This is an incredibly accurate rifle whenever I run the right kinds of ammunition through it. And this Star BM, I actually like running this thing more than my 1911s because 9mm not only is cheaper and a lot lighter hitting, but I get the same ergonomics that I do with my 1911s. And I don't have the issues with hammer bite with this thing like I do with some of my 1911s. And hell, don't even get me started on this Heritage Rough Rider little revolver. I have shot this thing a tremendous amount of times. 22 long rifle is definitely one of the cheaper things to get and shoot even in today's economy. So I will take shooting some of that 22 long rifle over shooting a full power revolver cartridge any day of the week. So which category do you guys fall into? Are you the kind of person to want absolutely everything 100% exact, and you need whatever it is that's being shown off to be a precise clone in order to discuss any kind of representation of said object? Like, for example, if I started using this right here, talking about the 1911, in this particular case, like I'd be talking about the 1911's locking system, and this right here literally has the same locking system as the 1911. If I started talking about that, or perhaps single stack magazines or something like that, would you be the kind of person to tell me, hey, no, that's absolutely not the case, simply because that is not exactly what it is that we're looking for. Whenever it comes to clones, we can only clone so much so well here in the United States. And just there's purists out there who, no matter how close you get it to that cloned item, the purists out there are just not going to like it. So rather than go out and say that I have any clones of XYZ item, I just kind of tell people, yeah, this is an inspired item based off of that. Like, for example, I got this over here. This is a 1911 A1 made by Tysis, that company out of Turkey. I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced. But there's a couple of things that are different with this 1911 A1 build. The hammer profile is a little bit different. The actual grips themselves, anyone who's actually handled real Bakelite 1911 grips on the real 1911 A1s, they know how good those feel. Well, these feel like melted down Tupperware that has just kind of been slapped onto the side of the 1911. And they don't feel nearly as good. So the purists might, not like that. The hammer profile, like I said, is different. There's just a couple of things. The beaver tail, slightly different profile. The engravings on the safety on this thing, slightly different. The engravings on the slide release, slightly different. There's just some very, very, very minor differences with this 1911 A1 in comparison to those other 1911 A1s. But a lot of people would call this a clone because, man, it is so close. It is outlandishly close to a 1911 A1. Some people would call this a clone. Some people would just call this an inspired build because it is not exactly precise down to the smallest minute detail. Where do you guys fall into the category for something like this? Or hell, I have my 8mm Mauser Car 98. This right here is all original except for the butt plate. The butt plate is a reproduction Car 98 aluminum cupped butt plate. So this right here is not an all original Car 98, although most of it is original. With this right here, would you guys consider this to be a Car 98 clone? Would you consider it to be a Car 98 inspired build? Because technically this is not a Car 98 piece. This was, some Chinese factory that molded this as a new item. Where would this fall into the category? Where do you guys draw the line with things like that? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm sure you guys are going to tell me. So, thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate your time. I hear Kevin freaking out over there somewhere. Thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below. Link to all sorts of stuff. Go ahead and go check that out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see y'all on the next episode. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. Shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.